All right, we're going to be looking at the next section in the memory notes. So section 7.2 on memory processes. So you're gonna want to have your notes out so you can fill them in as we go. If you have any questions on section 7.1, make sure you email me so I can address those. All right, 3 processes of memory. So the first section was on categories of memory. Recall we looked at explicit and implicit memory. We looked at episodic memory, which is autobiographical. We looked at semantic memory, which is general knowledge. And we looked at implicit memory, which is procedural knowledge. And then we looked at how our memories can be manipulated, how they're mutable, looking at the research of Elizabeth Loftus. And now we're moving on to memory processes. All right, process number 1, encoding. Oh, the first question on your sheet are what are the 3 processes of memory? So the first one's encoding. We'll be looking at them in order. So it's translation of information into a form in which it can be stored. That's your definition. So then we receive information from around us through our senses, and then our brain encodes it. And how our brain encodes it depends on how our senses pick it up. So we'll see that as we follow through here. So you have visual codes, that's things that you see. Now you probably have it where you're taking a test or something, and you can remember where exactly in your notes that information is, or the exact part of the textbook where that information is written down. Or maybe when you're doing Bible memory, you can remember what column of the Bible and approximate location where that verse is that you memorized. So these are all examples of visual codes, or mental pictures and images that you use to remember information. Acoustic codes has to do with your hearing, sounds. So your brain also encodes memories using things that you've heard. And so you can remember hearing someone say something. And that's a way that your brain encodes a memory. Now, if you repeat a phrase or a number over and over to remember it, you're activating these acoustic codes. So it's also helpful, like reading your notes out loud to study, or explaining your notes to the mirror or the wall, or to a friend or family member, because you are engaging another way of your brain storing information. A third way to encode memory is called semantic. And so it brings meaning to information. So examples, make the phrase into an acronym. So sometimes we do things like Roy G. Biv. What is Roy G. Biv? Well, you know, it's the colors of the spectrum, but otherwise it has no meaning. Now, how many millions of people remember Roy G. Biv to remember the colors in the spectrum? That's an example of a semantic code. Another one would be Holmes, for us Michiganders, as a way to remember the Great Lakes, Holmes, H-O-M-E-S. Maybe from English, you know, fanboys. That's coordinating conjunctions, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, fanboys. Another one would be like, you know, King Philip came over from Greenland swimming. So you're attaching meaning to meaningless things to remember. In that case, kingdom, phylum, etc. The planets, right? There's a little ditty to remember the planets. So These are all different ways of encoding information. And so then you might be wondering, like, okay, what is OTTFFSSENT at the top of the slide? Well, those are the first letters for the numbers 1 through 10. So if I just asked you to memorize those letters, maybe kind of difficult. If you knew those were the first letters to the numbers 1 through 10, not so difficult to memorize. All right, process number 2 is storage. So we've covered the first process, encoding, visual codes, acoustic codes, semantic codes, and now we're on storage. So the definition that you need to know is maintenance of encoded information over a period of time. Kind of a goofy definition. Basically, it's like encoding is how you put it into storage, and then how your memory is maintained in your brain is storage. So people use different storage techniques that will make retrieval easier. So one way is maintenance rehearsal. So this has to deal with how you've encoded and then how you maintain that encoded information. And so if you repeat something over and over again to keep from forgetting, we call that maintenance rehearsal. So you might do that memorizing by memory or memorizing any other tidbits of information. In the textbook, there's a little story there about Dan. He asks or gets a girl's number, name and number, because he wants to call her, and then other people ask him questions, and then before he can write it down, he's forgotten it because he repeated it, but he couldn't remember it because of interference. So you might have, I mean, it used to be that you had to memorize phone numbers. We didn't have cell phones all over the place. So when I was a kid, you know, the phone numbers are 7 digits long because your working memory can hold that many digits. And so you're like, you'd get someone's phone number and you'd have to memorize it if you couldn't write it down. But nowadays you just put it into your phone, so your memory is not as active. It's a poor way to remember items for a long time because it's just, if you picture your brain as a file system, throwing a phone number in a file without connecting it to anything else is just kind of in the middle of nowhere. If you can imagine trying to find a little bit of information in a huge file system, maybe you have that with a computer, right? You saved your paper for English, but you didn't really pay attention to where you saved it to. And then you're looking for it and you have no idea where it is. So it's a poor way to remember items for a long time. All right, elaborative rehearsal. This is relating new information to information you already know well. So in this way, you're intentionally taking new information and you're connecting it in your brain to things you already know. Now, I try to do this as a teacher. I'm constantly doing this when I'm teaching to try to help you. So already in this lesson, when we're talking about semantic encoding, I said Roy G. Biv. I said homes and fanboys and etc. Those are connecting to things you probably already know. And so I'm trying to connect my new concept to something that's already in your head. So anytime I'm giving examples, I'm using elaborative rehearsal. I'm trying to get you to pull information in your brain that you know well and connect it to new information that I want you to know. That's elaborative rehearsal. And it's a much more effective way of storage than maintenance rehearsal. The more, your brain is all these connected synapses, right? And so the more connections you can make in your brain to information, the easier it will be to recall it because you have multiple pathways to get to that information instead of just one. So you're trying to make multiple. So the question in the notes was, what's the difference between maintenance rehearsal and elaborative rehearsal? So maintenance is a poor way to remember things. You're just repeating something over and over again. Elaborative rehearsal is you're making that deep connection to prior knowledge so that you can remember it. Okay. So as I already mentioned, our brains Our memories work like a gigantic filing system. We associate information about common topics together and helps us to store and remember the information. And so yeah, like when you're sitting in class, you know, way back in the day when people actually went to a school building. I don't know if you remember that. When I was a kid, when I was in high school, we would actually show up to a building we called the school. And then we would sit in desks. You know what a desk is? It's kind of like a very uncomfortable thing. It's got a chair and then a flat top that's never big enough where you'd set your books and things. You could never get comfortable in it. And sometimes the person behind you would like kick your desk. It's really annoying. Or your desk would squeak or whatever. But just, yeah. And so then you'd sit in these desks for hours every day. And then, you know, teachers would actually, like we'd have like a whiteboard, it was called. We could write things on it with markers. And, you know, we'd have an overhead projector. Probably don't know what that is either. You connect it to your computer so everyone could see what was on your computer screen. And that was kind of useful. And they had smart screens, some people did. And anyway, oh, those were the days. But yeah, so yeah, I can't remember what I was saying. Okay, just got caught in the nostalgia of what it was like to go to school when I was a kid. Sometimes that happens. You know, memory is the second thing to go. Memory is the second thing to go. I can't remember what the first thing is. Okay, so store, remember information, right? Gigantic filing system. Make lots of connections in our memories, makes things easier to remember. All right, moving on. Filing errors. Sometimes we file information to the wrong folder or we mislabel it. Just kind of like a idea, like it, just like in a file system, if you name something, if you named your English paper on your computer, some, you know, untitled or something like that, some default thing, or you named it by something by mistake, you were saving a whole bunch of files and you forgot which one was your English paper, or you didn't take time to be careful, then you might not find that information until you know, a long time later, you just randomly open something, oh, there's my English paper, I thought I'd lost it. Well, you can do that in your memory too. You can hear something and you can you know, think in your, as you're remembering it, you can think, oh, that's so and so or whatever. Let's give an example that's probably more tangible. So let's say you hear a song and you're like, oh, who sings this song? And someone tells you the wrong information and it doesn't sound right to you, whatever, but so you remember it as so and so sings that song, and you just take that for granted. And then maybe a few weeks later you hear that song again and someone else asks you, hey, who sings that song? You're like, oh, so and so. And then someone else in the group's like, no, they don't sing that, it's this person. You look it up on your phone and you figure out that, you know, you were wrong because someone had told you the wrong answer. So sometimes we misfile things. We don't have accurate information. We didn't hear things correctly, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so we're gonna play a little game now. So what you need is your memory, and then off to the side, you need a piece of paper and a pen. So you might want to pause this to go get that. Or maybe you have, I mean, you could use, if you have room in your notes someplace, maybe on the very back page if you printed it out, or if you have empty back pages, if it's not two-sided, that would be fine too. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture that's got 20 images. And I'm going to give you, let's say 45 seconds to memorize those 20 pictures. Okay? So as soon as I switch, I'm going to give you 45 seconds. Don't cheat and pause it. Okay? Don't cheat and pause it. right? Just do your best to see if you can memorize all 20 of these in 45 seconds. Okay, ready? On your mark, get set, go. Okay, that was 45 seconds. Now write everything down that you can remember. All right, hopefully that's enough time. Let's take a look at, see how you did. Did you get them all 20? Yay, nay? Most likely not. When I do this, most people do not get all 20 in 45 seconds. That's very quick. So if you didn't get all 20, no problem. Okay, so that's, I don't know if you use a technique or not, or if you just tried to put them in your head or what you did. Usually if we were in class, like back in a school setting, I would ask you questions about how did you try any strategies? How did you try to remember the stuff? How many did you get? Whatever. Okay, so the next thing in your notes there is the method of loci. So this is a form of elaborative rehearsal where you connect new information to locations that you know very well. So remember, elaborative rehearsal is taking new information, connecting it to something you know very well. And so the method of loci is specifically connecting new information to locations. Loci means locations in Latin. So locations that you know very well. So for me, so like, you know, I know my house really well, the rooms of my house where I lived, where I'm living, sorry. That school building I was telling you about, where I went to high school, I know that building really well. So what I want you to think of right now is I want you to think of a place that you have 20 distinct locations. And I want you to maybe make a list of them right now, make a list of, so you want the locations to all be connected. Now, this could be in a small setting or a bigger setting. So for example, let's say I'm doing my high school. Then I'm going to think like, I might start in Mr. Inglesman's room. And then, so that's location number 1. And then location number 2 would be the band room. But location number 3, Mrs. West's room. Location number 4, the art room. Location number 5, the computer room. Location number 6, the weight room. Location number 7, the library. Location number 8, the kitchen. Location number 9, my room. Location 10, Mr. Tenelsof's. Location 11, the gym. Location 12, the ESSP room. Location 13, the PE office. Location 14, the home ec kitchen. Location 15, the wood shop. Location 16, Doc's room. Location 17, Miss Fergunt's room. Location 18, Mrs. Biles. Location 19, Mr. Bleeker's. Location 20, the chemistry room. Okay, and you could use a different set of 20. Let's say that's my list, and I write those 20 down. Maybe it's your house, and you've got 20 different places in your house. You're like the garage, the entryway, the mudroom, the living room, the kitchen, the dining room, the bathroom, the laundry, whatever. If you can get 20. You can do it in a bigger setting. You could do like 20 places in your hometown that you know really well. So, or you could think like of a major road. Like for example, I live right off the East Beltline. So I spend a lot of time driving up and down the Beltline. So I could think of 20 places on the East Beltline pretty easily. Whether that's restaurants, stores, shops, places I go normally, gas stations, the bridge across the Grand River, whatever, the bank. So you want to come up with a place. It could be bigger. You could think of like the map of the United States, and you could think of 20 different places you've been, or you could think of 20 different states on the map. Hopefully you're getting the idea of it. It doesn't really matter as long as you write those 20 down so that you know what they are, so you can reference them in just a minute. So if you got to pause the video to do that, to write your 20 down, it's very important that you have that set. Because what we're going to do next is we're going to look at another set of 20 pictures. And this time, I want you to imagine each picture in your locations. Okay, so, and if you can have interaction, the more kind of absurd the interaction, maybe it'll help you remember it a bit more. So if I back this up to our original picture, let's say I was using my old high school, just because we're fondly remembering what school used to be like. So if I go back and say, okay, location number 1 was Mr. Inglesman's room. Let's say the first picture here is a butterfly. Let's say I imagine Mr. Inglesma chasing a butterfly in his classroom. All right. Location number 2 was the band room. So let's say picture number 2 is the office chair. Let's say Mrs. Holstig threw her office chair out the band room window. Would she ever do that? No. However, just to be absurd, location 3 was Mrs. West. Let's say you picture, you know how Mrs. West, sometimes she would put pens or pencils in her hair. So like you got a pencil there, we'll say is the third picture. So if you pictured some kid in your class grabbing the pencil out of Mrs. West's hair and running away with it or something. You get the idea. You picture the object being used in your location, and the more kind of crazy the interaction, the more likely you remember it. And so so you can think of how you would do it with these pictures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a new group of pictures, and I'm going to give you 45 seconds, just like I did last time. And your goal, of course, is to remember all 20. And so that's why I have it. So you have your list of 20 locations written out on a piece of paper. And obviously you're not writing things down when I show you the picture, but so that you can look at each one to remember where you're putting things. So I'm gonna give you 45 seconds to match picture with location. And we'll see how this goes. Okay? So hold on, gotta find, all right. You got 45 seconds, one item per location, 20 locations. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, now I want you to write them down. Okay, so how'd you do? Here's the list. Obviously, this works a lot better in the classroom. You can actually talk about it and what worked, what didn't work, or how things go, or laugh about what you missed. Did you do better on this technique than you did the original technique? Now, I've had it before where some people are like, oh, I did a lot better on the first list. This didn't work for me at all. Well, remember, this is the first time you're trying it, most likely. And so there's like, if you tried using this method a bunch of times, you'd get better at it. And this is like a research-backed method for memory. So take that into consideration. So where would this be useful? Anytime you have to memorize a bunch of information, maybe for a science class or history or whatever, and where this would make sense as a useful method to remember things. But the point is hopefully you remembered things better with the method of loci, and a reason being is that you're connecting it to places you know very, very well, right? So your brain, you're not just throwing pictures into the emptiness of your brain, you're throwing pictures into locations that you know extremely well. For me, it was the school. So it's kind of a bummer that you people probably don't even know what a school building is, but so be it. All right, let's move on. Process number 3, retrieval. I had method of loci before our memories are like a filing system, but I covered both those slides, so sorry about that. All right, the third memory process is retrieval. Definition, our ability to recall information is dependent on how well we store the information, how we encoded it. That's not the definition, sorry. That's just what it is. So, for example, do you remember the letters from the slide from number 5? That's the O, T, T, F, F, S, S, E, N, T. The letters from the first 10 digits, right? Well, if you remembered that semantic encoding, probably did. So the better you encode information, the more, and if you use elaborative rehearsal in your storage, the better you are able to retrieve it, which is the goal of memory in many cases, right? If you're studying for something, you want to be able to retrieve that information. And so it would behoove you to figure out how your memory works so that you can, especially if you're going to college, to be an efficient memorizer of information will greatly benefit you the rest of your life. All right, context-dependent memory. So your ability to recall memories is dependent on being where they were encoded. So you are more likely to remember things if you are physically located where you memorize them in the first place. So have you ever had it before where, like, let's say you have a summer cottage that you go to every year, or a summer campsite or something. And so let's say it's August, that's the time you always go to your summer cottage for a week. And you walk into the cottage and immediately memories come back to you. Or maybe you could think of memories. Or you ever have it like you're in, like you're at the cottage and then you're like, oh, do you remember when so-and-so broke that door or fell off that stool or broke that window? Or like when you're in that physical location, you're better able to remember things that happened at that physical location. So that's a big deal. So that's why, yeah, so you might experience that phenomenon where you remember things, you know, when you go to grandma's house, you remember things better that happened at grandma's house. The example there, the swimmer words, that's from the textbook where they had people swim or go underwater with breathing apparatus and memorize things, and people on land memorize things, and then they, each of them having a control group. So then they had people who learn things in the water try to give that information back on land and in water, and they remembered things better in water than they did on land. And the people who learned things on land recalled them better on land than they did in water. So your physical context matters. And songs can bring back context-dependent memories as well. So hearing songs can take you back to places where you remember events or whatever the case may be. I'm sure you can think of examples of that. All right, the next is state-dependent memory. You're actually going to read about this. I posted a reading on Gordon Bauer, state-dependent memory. And so we'll revisit this after. And lastly, this is one of my favorite terms in the book, on the tip of the tongue. The tip of the tongue phenomenon. When you feel you know something, in fact, you're sure you know something, but you just can't put it into words. It's on the tip of your tongue. It's called the tip of the tongue phenomenon. Now, how ironic would it be if you were taking the test and you couldn't remember the tip of the tongue phenomenon because it was on the tip of your tongue? Well, hopefully you've enjoyed section 7.2. I know I have, taking me down memory lane, fond memories of this thing we called school. If you have any questions, email me. Read Gordon Bauer's State Dependent Memory, and we will talk soon.